Hello children, today in this video we are going to study about our next chapter, which is analytical chemistry. So let's get started with that. Analytical chemistry, it is a branch of chemistry in which sample is analyzed, and sample is analyzed both on the basis of qualitative as well as quantitative with the help of some specific types of reagents. Qualitatively, that means identifying an unknown substances by observing its response to certain tests, and quantitative is determining the quantity of a substance in a given solution. Okay, so salts of the different metals, what they do, they form different colored precipitate, and when they form different colored precipitate, when they react with ammonium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide. What is precipitation? It is the formation of an insoluble solid when solutions are mixed. Formation of an insoluble solid. Insoluble solid is formed when these solutions are mixed, and the solid substance which is formed, it is precipitate. Okay, so ammonium hydroxide is very common reagent, and it precipitates metals as their hydroxide, and these hydroxides can be easily identified on the basis of its color or solubility in excess of solvent. In the same way, sodium hydroxide reacts with different salt solution and they form colored precipitate, and sometimes the precipitate dissolves when it is added in excess. Metals and their oxides, they can easily react with the acids and they form metal salts. But amphoteric metals, that means which can react both with acids and salts, and their amphoteric oxides, they also react with alkalis such as this sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide, and they form corresponding salts or complex salts. Now children, salts of copper. So there are different salts of copper. Okay, see here, copper carbonate, it is green in color. Copper sulfate, it is blue in color. Copper nitrate, it is also blue in color. And these are the color of salt. Okay, then color in aqueous solution, copper carbonate, it will be insoluble in water but green in color. Okay, in the same way, copper sulfate, it will be, when it is in aqueous solution, it is blue in color. Copper nitrate, when it is in aqueous solution, it is also blue in color. Now, preparation of solutions from salts. Children, we know that different salts of copper, they provide Cu2 plus ion. That means which gives color in their aqueous solutions. But copper carbonate, that means this one, copper carbonate, it is of green color. It is insoluble in water. Okay, but it gives a green colored solution when it combines with hydrochloric acid, and it also gives free copper ions. It also gives free copper ions. Okay. Now, next step we will see ki action of this sodium chloride. So when we'll add sodium chloride solution to a solution which is having copper ions, then what it does? It forms pale blue precipitate of copper hydroxide. Copper, when added to sodium hydroxide, what it gives? It gives a pale blue precipitate of copper hydroxide. Copper hydroxide, that means, and sodium ions are formed. Okay. It is in the form of precipitate. So here it will be clear. 2 plus. Now, so this precipitate, it is now insoluble. When we'll add more sodium hydroxide, when we'll add more sodium hydroxide drop by drop, then after this precipitate will be there, okay, insoluble. Now action of ammonium hydroxide, this was the action of sodium hydroxide. Now what happens when ammonium hydroxide is being added? So copper, when reacts with ammonium hydroxide, that means NH4OH, then what it forms? It will form copper hydroxide. Copper hydroxide, it is also pale blue copper hydroxide, and NH4 ammonium ions are formed. Clear? So this was the action of ammonium hydroxide on copper ions. Now again, this, when we add excess of ammonium hydroxide, this precipitate will become soluble, and it forms a complex ion of deep blue in color. Now salts of calcium. So how we will prepare solution from salts? Generally salts, calcium salts, they are white in color and they are soluble in water forming colorless solutions. But calcium sulfate, that means CaSO4, calcium sulfate and calcium carbonate, CaCO3, they are insoluble in water. So aqueous solution, it will contain calcium plus ions. Now what is the action of sodium hydroxide? Sodium hydroxide, when added to this calcium ions, what it forms? It will form a white precipitate of calcium hydroxide, and this sodium ion is released. Okay. Now, precipitate is insoluble. Again, when we'll add excess of sodium hydroxide in this calcium ion solution. Now, action of ammonium hydroxide, that means NH4OH, in this calcium ion solution. Okay, what is formed? When this ammonium hydroxide, it is added to a solution which is having calcium ions, then it does not form any solution. So, no precipitate will form. There will be no precipitate. Now, salts of iron. When we'll prepare the solution from salt, preparation of solution from salts, what we see, iron, it exists in two states. That is in iron ferrous state and in ferric state. Ferrous state and in ferric state. Okay. And they give different colored salts and their respective solutions. But the precipitate formed by iron 2, that means ferrous, is of dirty green in color. It will be dirty green in color. And that of iron 3, it will be of reddish brown in color. Reddish brown in color. Okay. So that means they give different colors. Now action of sodium hydroxide on iron. When sodium hydroxide solution, NaOH solution, it is added to a solution which is having iron ions, that means ferric ion, then what will happen? We'll see. Fe2 plus. Okay. Then it forms, I've already told you, the color of Fe2 plus is dirty green. So what is formed? Iron 2 hydroxide is formed. It is FeOH2 along with sodium ions. Okay, and this is precipitate. The precipitate is insoluble. This will be insoluble if excess amount of sodium hydroxide it is added again and again. Okay. Now, next will be when NaOH solution, that means sodium hydroxide solution, is added to a solution which is having Fe3+, then what is formed? It will form a precipitate of iron hydroxide, FeOH2, and sodium is formed. Okay, FeOH3, it is a precipitate. So the precipitate again, it is insoluble when excess amount of sodium hydroxide it is being added to. Now, action of ammonium hydroxide, that means NH4OH. So when this is added in this solution, when aluminum hydroxide solution is added to a solution which is containing Fe2+ ion, then it forms a dirty precipitate of iron hydroxide. Iron hydroxide, that means FeOH2 along with ammonium ions. Okay, it is also a precipitate. Now, the precipitate again, it is insoluble when excess amount of ammonium hydroxide it is being added. So when ammonium hydroxide is added to a solution which is having Fe3+ ion, then it forms a reddish brown precipitate of iron 3 hydroxide. Fe3+ NH4OH, it will give iron hydroxide, that means Fe along with NH4. Okay, it is a precipitate. The precipitate again, it is insoluble when excess amounts of this ammonium hydroxide it is being added to the solution.